So let's talk about the Chicago Marathon versus the New York City Marathon. Promised I'd give you my opinions on the two and which one I ultimately think is the best choice. The reason that I picked these two marathons is both because they're world marathon majors and they're US based, so we're talking about the best of the two in the US. The reason I exclude Boston is because there's really no way to apply for a lottery for the Boston Marathon. As many people know, you have to get in through a qualifying time. There are charity spots, things like that. But ultimately, we're talking about two races that anybody can just apply for the general lottery and try and secure a place in those marathons without any other, additional time qualifications or charity partnerships and things like that. So let's talk about those two. And like I said, which one is ultimately the best. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm from New York, so I am partial to New York City. I lived in New York City for a while, but that doesn't really impact, I think, my ultimate decision on which one is the best. If anything, it actually kind of takes away from New York because a lot of the sights and things that I think people see during the New York City Marathon and fall in love with during the course are things that I see or have seen many times before. So first off, Chicago started in 1977 with like 4,200 runners. Now it's grown to over 45,000 runners each year for the most part. New York City started in 1970 with only 127 people running the New York City Marathon. And now it's the largest marathon in the world, I believe, with over 53,000 people finishing the race last year. That's not even how many started. I think it was over 56,000 people started the New York City Marathon the last time they ran it. And, 53,000, like I said, finished. So both huge marathons. Again, this is why I say let's compare the two. These are marathon majors. If you want to get your finishing medal from the World Marathon Majors, you have to run New York City and Chicago, and they're just a step up from some of the other big marathons in the country. But it's just a whole nother level with the level of participants, the number of fans and crowds and everything like that. So that's what we're going to talk about really today. One of the first and most important things I think that factor into which one is the best is the ease of getting in, or how do you get in. New York City can be very frustrating, and Chicago, tends to be a little bit easier, but either way, they both have a lottery system. I think Chicago is usually the end of the year where the lottery opens just after the marathons run in October. And then they usually have the drawing around February the following year for that year's marathon. And New York City is similar, but I think just a little bit behind Chicago. You go on the website, put in your name for the lottery, put in your payment information around December, maybe January. And then I think later in the spring, New York City then has their drawing and lets you know who ultimately, got into the marathon. So the drawing system is very similar. But the difference is Chicago has, according to Runner's World, around 53% of the people who apply for the lottery get in. Maybe they have around 54,000 applicants, 50,000 applicants for Chicago. So that's a pretty good rate, points for Chicago for, having a system where it's easier for the average person to get into the lottery and get in. I think if you apply, every year, 2 or 3 years, you're probably going to get a spot in the Chicago Marathon. The New York City Marathon, on the other hand, is much more difficult to get into just through the lottery. If you're not local, which, just excluding the possibilities of local runners in both Chicago and New York, there are other methods of getting in. But through the lottery, New York City is much more difficult. There's recorded over 180,000 applicants have applied for the New York City Marathon. You see percentages around like 18% of the people who apply to run through the lottery actually get in. There's been years where it's been reported as few as 4,500 runners were selected from the lottery to actually run the marathon. And that comes from, more of the tickets and spots for the marathon going to people who have earned guaranteed entry in New York City. Like I said, being there myself, I've actually, been able to run it pretty much whenever I want. But that takes spots away from the lottery. And there's a lot of other corporate sponsorships and things that, money kind of talks, charities, things like that the openings go to. So through the lottery, it's very difficult. I know people have posted on Facebook, things like that. It's taken them 7 years and they still can't get a lottery spot. So unfortunately, if you're not in New York City, it can be very difficult to get in. And again, that's why, Chicago kind of takes the points there because they really have a system that works for the everyday runner all around the country or all around the world, being able to get into the marathon itself. So a big thing, I'm sure, for anybody who's running one of these marathons, you're doing it for not only the crowd of people you're running with, but the crowd that's watching the race. And on a good day, a nice day that's sunny, has good weather, Chicago apparently has around 1.7 million spectators kind of come out on the course and cheer everybody on. When I've run the marathon myself, I have to say, the almost the entire course is just lined with people. It's an amazing environment. The whole first half of the race, I think, really is one of the best portions of the crowd that are there. Through the first 14 miles, the northern part of the course, there's just, people on everywhere on the street. You seem to go into kind of a residential neighborhood. There's just people around everywhere. Miles 16 to 18 seem to be kind of like the dead zone. And it is what it is. It's a little bit quieter there. You just kind of go out into this more almost like business district, but like low-rise business offices or things like that. So it gets a little bit quieter. Unfortunately, it's like right when you start to get tired in a marathon. Miles 16, 17, 18 might start to get a little difficult. So that does make it tough, with the crowd and the way it's set up and just where the crowd happens to be. But the crowd does pick back up around I think it's mile 21. You kind of go into Chicago's Chinatown, and all of a sudden, the crowds are back. People are on the streets, and really from there all the way to the finish line, the crowds are there cheering you on. So they pick back up where it matters, when you're really pushing through to the finish line. And that's ultimately just a really good experience for me. It's tons of people. I mean, almost 2 million people. That's crazy, being out on the street cheering you on. That's an amazing environment to run in. So that's Chicago. That's kind of where it is. Yeah, there's some dead zones, but I'd say, more than New York City, they really have some solid coverage throughout the entire race. So New York City has around 1 million spectators each year for the marathon. It's a different course. Chicago's a loop, so there's, I think, just a little bit easier for people to kind of go out and watch maybe the first half and the last half of the race, whereas New York City is a point-to-point. So yeah, once you get into Manhattan, you can kind of bounce around a little bit, but you definitely have different groups of people along the course throughout the day. My family was great. They have gone, from Queens to Manhattan to 2 different spots in Manhattan and the finish line to see me, but that's not necessarily what the general population is doing when they're watching the marathon. So the first 3 miles, for anyone who doesn't know, the New York City Marathon is really quiet. You're going over the Verrazano Bridge. There's no crowd, no fans are allowed on that bridge. It's all runners on both levels, which is an incredible experience and picture if you've ever seen it, of everybody running on both levels of the bridge. And obviously the views that people get from there are very unique and something that you can't see on foot, in any other situation besides the New York City Marathon. That bridge doesn't have a footpath of any kind. So that's very unique and different, but there's not a lot of, fans or spectators or anything like that. Once you get off the bridge, the course actually splits into 3 different paths. So depending on your corral color, which we're not really talking about today, but depending on your color, you may go one of 3 different ways, and you kind of meet back up later around, I think it's between mile 4 and 5. So that's a unique thing, but there's just lower crowd numbers at that point. It's really kind of a private experience for anyone who lives there. There are people outside of their doors, but they're just families on the street as you go through their neighborhood. So it's definitely different. It's not high security area. There's just kind of like roped off areas. So that's really what it is, but it's quieter. But it doesn't matter. It's the beginning of the race. You're not tired yet. You're just saying hi to the fans at that point. It's kind of cool. And, that's, again, miles 1, 2, 3, 4. The crowd starts to build up from there. Once you get past those first 3 to 4 miles, from there until really, Barclays Center and then beyond on Lafayette Avenue, so all the way through miles 9 and almost 10, you have great crowds. All the people in Brooklyn are pretty much, along that route there. I think it's on 4th Avenue. And that is just one of the most energetic areas I think you can have in the beginning of a marathon. More so than Chicago, I think people are a lot more interactive and vocal. Chicago has tons of people, but the people in Brooklyn are just like really, really hyped up to see you. I can just, from personal experience, I actually in 2019 ran both marathons together in the same year, New York City and Chicago. So New York City, I was taking it a little easier, and I took the opportunity to just like high five kids and people. And if you ever want to feel like you are a professional athlete or superstar and you haven't had that chance in your life, New York City is the place to do that. Kids are so excited. I mean, they literally, it's like you're their idol when you're running down the street. And they have signs, tap here to power up, all these things. Like, that is an amazing experience. And there's nothing like that area in Brooklyn, that whole stretch of the first, or from mile 4 to mile 10. Just a really interactive crowd, really energetic crowd, and there's nothing like that for most people in their life. So that's something that's really unique and special. There's some dead areas after that, like mile 10 is just a very quiet area. It's actually just a population of people that really aren't interested in the marathon at all. So you kind of bypass this kind of empty area. And then when you go from there, you kind of finish out your run in Brooklyn and into Queens, decent crowds, and then a lot of people just before the Queensboro Bridge or 59th Street Bridge as you go into Manhattan. So a lot of people there cheering you on as you're about to go over this, big challenging bridge, which is nice. Once you cross over the 59th Street Bridge, that's where the crowds really are probably the biggest. 2nd Avenue in Manhattan, after the Queensboro Bridge, there's tons of restaurants and bars. Everybody's out hanging out all day and just cheering on people as they go by. The bars and everything spill out onto the streets. You have really the most substantial barricades. There's steel barricades and security all along there, so that way no one's kind of spilling into the marathon course itself. But it's just full of people, again, so energetic, so happy to be there and see you run. They're really there just to see the people, not even the professional athletes. They're there all day to watch people run by who are just like you and I. So that whole stretch through really mile 20, 21 before you go into the Bronx is just, again, kind of like nothing else. I think just the most energetic crowd of people in Manhattan. And then you go into the Bronx, which is quiet, and you come back in to Manhattan again after a brief period in the Bronx, and you get another crowd going up Fifth Avenue. One of the challenging Fifth Avenue hills, as a lot of people have talked about and mentioned, mile 20 to 21 or so, just a challenging hill for that late in the race. Lots of crowds cheering you on for that as you go into Central Park, where again, tons of people are actually kind of spilling into the course a little bit at that point before you make your way to the finish line. So overall, I think even though there's more people at Chicago, I have to say, and I may be a little bit biased here, thinking, I don't know, being from New York, but there really is a unique experience in New York City. I think the crowd just edges out Chicago in terms of its energy, and it just maybe the placement of the crowd or where they happen to be. The dead zones don't really take away from the crowd energy or your race plans. It works out really well, and I think there's nothing like New York City for that, that standpoint. The crowds, the course, the scenery, everything that is New York. I'm going to give the edge to New York there. Another thing that I'll say, and really is just a quick point, easy, no questions asked. Chicago is the easier marathon course. Flat as a pancake. You can actually see New York City Marathon's got a lot of elevation change. Not in the grand scheme of things. Mountain runners, trail runners are going to laugh if they see the elevation for New York City Marathon. Probably plus or minus like 800 feet throughout the race. But it is tough. I mean, you're going over some pretty big bridges. And just some hills in the park and things like that. And for a marathon, if you're going for a PR, probably not going to happen in New York City. Chicago is the course for that. It's flat. And don't let anybody fool you about the hill at the end of the Chicago Marathon. It's really not a big deal. It's a small hill. It's quick. It's a little steep, but it's over fast. And it's during that last, I'd say 400 meters anyway, when you're kind of just pushing all out, trying to get to the finish line. And that hill's not going to make or break your race. It's just there. World records happen in the Chicago Marathon course all the time. So That's the place you want to be if you want to go your fastest. Hands down, Chicago. So the other thing I think that's most important, other than getting into the race, is getting around on race day. Obviously, the race and the environment is fun. It's cool to talk about, but the convenience of the racing is a big, factor. I think whether you're going to sign up for a race or not, or if you're up for the journey around, well, the New York City Marathon. Chicago, to start with, is easy. I've paid maybe $150 a night for a hotel that was literally 400 meters from Grant Park, where the marathon starts and finishes. So it makes the day super simple. I mean, you literally walk out of bed, you can roll right up to the course, the starting area, go check in, and you're there. When the race is over, again, you kind of come out of the park and you're right at your hotel. When I ran it, I actually think I left like within 2 hours from when I've crossed the marathon finish line in Chicago. I was already on a train back to the airport. It was that easy. I think my flight was like 3 hours after I anticipated finishing. I had no room for error, but I, ran right off the course, ran to my hotel, showered, checked out, got on a train, airport, done. So much easier there. The other thing that Chicago has is it's called the Balbo Hospitality Tent, and it's basically like $125, I think, for this hospitality tent. And what it gets you is, there's meet and greets with professional athletes, marathon runners from years past. Breakfast, so you can roll out of bed, go in there. There's a whole full breakfast with a tent covered, heated, so you're not cold waiting outside. You can get coffee, everything, and kind of prepare and fuel up for the race well before it opens. Private restrooms, there's porta potties, but tons of porta potties, way more than necessary for the amount of people that are in that tent. Whereas if you go to anything like, New York or Chicago, regular corrals, there's tons of lines for porta potties. If you have to use it more than once, you're going to be in line forever. It's stressful. It's very difficult. I highly recommend that Balbo hospitality tent. Really just for the race start alone is enough to make it worth it. It really takes the stress out of the day. You're escorted to your corral once it gets closer to the start of the race. You have private bag check just for the people of the hospitality tent, so you can get your stuff much quicker. Like I said, I was able to get in and out to the airport very quickly. When the race is over, there's more food, drinks. You can get massages. I got a private massage after the marathon, even still then able to make the airport and get on my flight. So all those pre and post race amenities are well worth the $125. I think even with the cost of Chicago being around $200, where New York City is more around $300, the cost of Chicago plus the hospitality tent, it's almost the same cost of New York City. So I was shocked more people don't do that. I kind of only just found out about it the last time I ran in Chicago, and if you're running Chicago, just do it. Well worth it if you can. It makes the day just super simple, super easy. You could stick around and see like the post-race events and everything in that hospitality tent. So if you're not running out quickly, it's still worth it. Stay around for the food and drinks and the party. Awesome way to do the marathon. New York City is, in my experience, the toughest race to get around. I've never seen anything like it. My best advice is to get a hotel somewhere near the finish line, between like Bryant Park, where there's buses to the start, and the finish line at the southwest corner of Central Park in New York City. The reason you want to do that is just it's crowded and difficult to get out of the marathon itself. You're going to walk probably a mile at least after you finish the marathon just to get out of the course, get your medal, get escorted through the exit corrals and gates, walk down the street to where you're actually allowed to join the general public and see family, your friends again. It's a marathon before and after the marathon for New York City. So being able to walk out and then walk to your hotel is a plus. And no matter what, there's really no good place to stay that you're going to have a quick access to the starting line in New York City. You're out in Staten Island, you're about to go over a bridge, the roads all closed down well before the race. So it's just not the place to stay if you want to be near the starting line. You're better off being near the finish. So being near the finish, you're going to be near a bus that takes you to the starting area on Staten Island. I think that's the best way to do it. You could also stay downtown, although you'd be far from the finish line, or you could take a train downtown and take the ferry to the starting line for New York City. If you're into the scenic part, the ferry's nice because you go by the Statue of Liberty, you get some more scenic views and everything before the race, so that's an option as well. But I think the best way, take from the New York Public Library, Bryant Park, you get on a bus at around 5:36 in the morning, take an hour and a half bus ride through traffic to get over the bridge, take a long time to get out, go through metal detectors, finally you get on the starting island, and then you wait around another hour, go to the bathroom, there is some food, coffee, things like that, start to line up for your corrals. I mean, it's a 4 or 5 hour day before you even start the New York City Marathon. So, I think enough said there. It's just prepare for a journey, prepare for an experience before you even run the race. So convenience, the ease of running the race and everything like that, hands down, goes to Chicago. If you're not up for a real challenge, don't even bother New York City. It will be a day and a half. So other than all those differences, I mean, the courses again are so similar. Even how you run to the northern parts of Chicago is very much like Brooklyn neighborhood-wise, with the brownstones, low-rise buildings. Hydration and fueling on the course is very similar. They're both marathon majors. They're well equipped with water like every mile, Gatorade mixed in, gels if you need at certain points throughout the race, but bring your own. But so they're very similar. The expos are really the same. Again, if you're in New York City, you're near Midtown, you'll be close enough to the expo, which has been at the Javits Center recently. In Chicago, if you stay right by Grant Park, the start and finish line, there's a bus stop that takes you to the expo really easy, really quick as well. So those things are so similar, and they're not even really a comparison as far as which one is a better marathon. So in the end, I think, although I think the crowds are still unbeatable in New York City, even though they're not out in as many numbers, just their vocalness, their loudness, everything is just, it's better in New York City as far as the crowds and the noise and atmosphere. I say it's better, but my answer is Chicago Marathon is still the best marathon of the major marathons in the U.S. that you can sign up, through a lottery. It's easier to get in, so you can, better plan it, to run the marathon itself. You have a decent chance of getting in each year. The convenience of being able to just go there and plan out to do a marathon, have your family watch and come with you, be right by the start and finish line, yourself just being near your hotel by the start and finish line, the additional hospitality tent option, all those things, the course, being able to go for a PR the year that you want to run it, all those those things together. I mean, Chicago is the number one choice. I still love New York. If you can do both, do both. If you're only going to go run one marathon in your life, it's tough because, again, the experience in New York City is so unique and different. But both have amazing crowds, amazing experiences. So Chicago is the number one, in my opinion.